Ryan Doyle in for Ezra tonight on The Source. Calgary City Council, art lovers, and critics are heading for a showdown in the spring as a public art policy proposal will be back with modifications. At the heart of the proposal is whether there should be public input into how the City of Calgary spends public dollars on city art. Rob Gibson has more in the Sun News special report.
They should spend it on cleaning the roads. We've had, how many thousands of accidents this week?
Chris is talking about this piece of art called The Traveling Light. It looks like a large blue ring with two lights on top, which cost almost $500,000 and was designed by German artists based in Berlin. Even Mayor Naheed Nenshi took exception to this work, calling it awful. But he is a strong supporter of Calgary's public art policy.
We don't want to go to referendum on this stuff. That's not a great idea. But public input on art competitions always makes sense.
Council also wants to resculpt the proposal to avoid the type of pushback they received on projects like the Blue Ring and the Peace Bridge. They also want to look at spending less than the mandated 1% on mega projects like the LRT expansion.
It's like when they built the Peace Bridge. I like it and everything, but I think it was a lot of money that the city wasted where they could put it toward, better things for our community.
What I would like to see is the public have more opportunity to get engaged with public art, but not necessarily to choose it. I'm not the best I'm not qualified to choose public art. I'm willing to let the experts choose, but I think that the jury, for example, could have more members of the public on the jury.
Back in October, the Calgary Sun created a web poll where Calgarians could look at some current and future projects and vote on them. Of the 9 projects listed, only 2 got the thumbs up, which suggests an underwhelming vote of confidence in the way these projects are currently being selected. This piece of art is called The Promenade. It was done by British artist Julian Opie, and it cost $650,000. Art, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. But when it comes to spending public dollars, the line between eyesore and beauty is far more critical and expensive. And when it comes to this particular policy, it looks like the City of Calgary is going back to the drawing board.
There's channels out there to reach out to the community, but
maybe it needs to be easier online?
Yeah, online would be great.
And that's what really this is all about, is to build a city that we're proud of.
This has been a Sun News special report.
Now, I have to say, the last one, the Promenade, looked kind of cool. And then they told you the price tag, over $600,000. I mean, that's not worth it, if you ask me, when you talk about what looks cool versus the overall price of things. Derek Fildebrandt is the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Derek, listen, I love that kind of art with the moving people. They're walking back and forth. But if you gave that job to the private sector, they could probably come out well under $600,000.
Yeah, that special report, I think, really hit the nail on the head in terms of identifying what the issue is here. Most people aren't opposed to the idea of public art. I'm a big supporter of public art. Canadian Taxpayers Federation has always supported the idea that we should be spending some public dollars on private art. But there are some people within the public art community who have a visceral resistance to any involvement by the private sector. I mean, I was debating a chap on this on the CBC radio a couple of months ago when this traveling light, the big blue zero ring was a big hot issue, and there was this belief that any involvement by the private sector in terms of building public art is somehow less valuable because it's not paid for by taxpayers and is therefore somehow not representative of the community. But you look at 2 contrasting cities, Vancouver and Seattle. Both of them are beautiful cities, very similar economies. Yet Seattle's got an even more thriving arts community because they've built a model where the private sector is welcomed and engaged in public art. Whereas Vancouver is more exclusively government funded, and they've effectively crowded out private sector investors. So there are some people, not all, but there are quite a number of people within the arts community who believe that any kind of private sector involvement somehow diminishes the value of this.
Derek, how much of this is snobbery, just sheer snobbery, though? The idea, well, the people couldn't decide what is art and what looks good. That has to be left to the art community. And if we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, you, the taxpayer, don't get a say because you don't have the same background as we do. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. I think if you go online and you tell people, vote here for what you like and what you want to see in your public squares and your public parks, and you're paying for it, that's the way it really should go down. And include the price tag as well, and then that way people know that they're getting what they're paying for, or something's ugly and they just don't want it in their community.
Well, that was the gist of the argument against any kind of public consultation when I was debating this guy a few months ago. The idea that we're all just a bunch of barbarian plebs and therefore shouldn't have any input into this at all. Now, I don't think I'm qualified to choose what public art we should have.
No, but you certainly know what looks nice.
That you're not either, but
Derek,
but I think
you know what looks nice and what doesn't. You know what looks nice and what doesn't look nice, and you should have just as much of a vote as some guy who's wearing a beret and sipping a latte.
Yeah, exactly. So we should have some public consultation in this. I mean, when the government when the city of Calgary wants to build a road or say expand another lane onto a road, they consult the local residents and ask them what they think about this. That doesn't mean the local residents have the final say on it, but at least they consult them, get their opinion. They live there. They have to deal with this. They have to pay for it. Well, guess what? We have to live with this giant, ugly blue ring they call the traveling light. We have to pay for it. But the argument of these guys is we know better. We're artists. You just pay the bill and leave this work to us. But I don't think this should be dealt with any differently than any other kind of public works project where the public have at least some kind of input. It doesn't mean we have to have a referendum anytime we want to put a statue on a corner, but at least we have to ask the local residents and the taxpayers what they think.
Yeah, it's almost like if they could invent some sort of computerized mechanism where I could vote for something. Oh, wait a minute, we have that already. It's called the internet. You don't need a massive referendum. You can simply put the picture up, put the price tag up, and have people vote. And dare I say, the idea here, if you open this kind of thing up to people, you might get more support for the arts and public art than you have now.
Yeah, well, you look at, public art largely does define a city, and we identify cities largely by the art and the architecture in these cities. But the stuff we're getting right now, I dare say, 200 years from now, people are not going to look back at Calgary and look at this giant blue ring and say, that was a city on the move. This is a civilization that we should be proud of. The way we look today at Vienna, Munich, Paris, London, we look at the art from 200 years ago as that was a golden age of accomplishment. Things were happening. That must have been an interesting society. I don't think people are looking at some of the art that we're paying to produce and put up right now and say the same thing. Public art could contribute so much to a city, making it more livable, making it more beautiful, attracting tourists. But, there seems to be this obsession at the municipal level, not just in Calgary. I mean, they have it up in Edmonton, too. There's this famous stack of balls. And it's because they have no consultation with the public.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. We're talking about fad art, and I think we're going to see it continue to grow as long as the public is paying for it. We appreciate the time.
My pleasure.